Everything's spinning. Oh, I love, don't you love that moment? It's like, you better come to life because the live button just went on.
100%.
Well, let me say hello to Shawn. And Shawn, I put a little note in the notes for this call that you are also a certified high performance coach like I am. And you're a very dear friend. And I'm super happy. I just want to give everyone the transparency to let them know I just invited you to do this live, like, I don't know, an hour ago and said, hey, are you willing?
And of course I said yes.
But I want to tell everyone the reason why I was so excited about coming live with you is that I, for the past week, have really been wanting to do a Facebook Live about grief and celebration, sadness and joy, what it means to be someone who is on a path of wanting to have growth mindset and positivity, but also, of course, human, right? And going through human things. And then I had coffee with you yesterday and your beautiful wife, Ashley, and we had the most wonderful conversation that included all of this. And I think this is a topic that's so important. So that's where I wanted to go. That's just all that I wanted to say. What about you? What did you think we were talking about yesterday?
Well, we brought up the book Bittersweet by Susan Cain, which is the combination or the idea that sadness connects us, and it's the art of turning sadness can be turned into art that helps us connect and makes us human. So like her question is, why do we like sad music? How do we cope with the big things in life, such as grief, such as not feeling like we're enough, or feeling disappointed for all the effort we're putting in, or we talked about a bunch of different areas where it could be this feeling of sadness with the excitement of doing the things that we're doing,
Yes.
and that sweet spot.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought in that, right? Because that is central, right? That idea. And I think this is something that Ian was there too, and we all got super, I think, animated around the connection that can happen when we are allowing ourselves to feel these human feelings together, right? And right now in the world, I mean, there's always a lot of grief. There's always a lot of war and natural disaster and personal loss. But right now feels especially like there's a lot going on that's bringing up things for people.
Definitely. And I mean, look at the news. Like, it's so heavy out there. And as an eternal optimist myself, like I'm the annoying guy on Monday, and it's like, happy Monday. And like, what is wrong with you? It's like, no, it's a good time to be here. And it's not an either or, I think, is kind of like the big thing. Like, you can be that optimist on Monday and then feel sad about things going on in your life or the world around you,
Yeah. And, I love that when I was writing up the little, like, what is this about, which I did about 2 seconds ago and realized, like, oh, I should have put some thought into this. But what came to me is that in my own life, it is this constant. I am not an eternal optimist. I practice optimism. I practice joy. I practice celebration. People who don't know me may think it's like who I am. And it is. And it is, and it's also not. I also have some very deep leanings toward sadness and melancholy, and so I love that we're having this conversation. And when I was writing up what this was about, what I was thinking is, where's that navigation line between a growth mindset, a choice to find the good in life, a choice to find happiness, and allowing the natural feelings that are grief and sorrow and loss. And there's, of course, no answer, I don't think, any easy answer to this, but I wanted to explore that with you, just so that I think to give more people permission, like you just said, permission to feel optimistic one moment and to be crying the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Since our conversation yesterday, I've been thinking about, like, so we have the Day of the Dad coming up. Was it in a couple of days now, to celebrate people we've lost, which brings up grief. And so I've been thinking a lot about my mom this week.
Oh.
And so, we lost her, I think, in like 2014 for complications from heart surgery. And it was a terrible thing with a loved one where it's like 6 months after the surgery of her in and out of the hospital with all sorts of things. But the weird thing that stuck with me with grief and remembering her is her love of the Beatles, right? She loved the Beatles, and I didn't realize how ubiquitous they still are in our culture until after she passed. You like go into the store and they're playing Yesterday, and I'm getting teared up, like, but that, so it's that particular like moment or that particular band of anytime I hear their songs, it's this joyful and sorrowful remembrance. So there's so many different moments like that, I think, where we can have those beautiful moments of feeling connected to someone we lost,
Oh my gosh, Shawn, it's so beautiful. And I know I never met your mom, but when I hear you talk about her, I always just, my heart, gives a little thud in there because it's so poignant, right? And I think that's what you're saying is actually one of the most perfect examples of bittersweetness, right? Like, and I've heard many people talk about as a way to honor someone that we've lost, to do something they love or share something they love. I just saw on TikTok someone whose mother used to bake bread and give it away to everyone. And so now he bakes bread, and gives it away in honor of her. And I think those are ways that we can feel both. And I think what you're saying, because we were talking about the Day of the Dead a little bit yesterday, as we were watching all the Halloween costumes, right? And that we have a lot of space in our culture for something like Halloween, candy and dressing up and the kids. But we maybe don't have quite so much space for the honoring of the dead because of, I think, what it brings up in us.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. We were also talking about how we live in a very forward-looking culture too, and trying to figure out, we're talking about different potential reasons why that is, but the ability to just, like, something happened, we move forward with our lives, look forward, always strive, always, try to do the straight line of progression and not the squiggly graph that is life, of ups and downs and sideways and forward and back and all of it, so that's why I really am super glad that you're like, hey, we should get on and get on social and talk about this, because I'm trying to think of other spaces in life where this is part of our culture to have a space for this.
Right, Shawn. And I'm super grateful to you too, because it's one of the things that is super important to me personally. We were talking about this. A lot of people who know me know, both my work in Brendan's world, bring the joy is a big part of my job and my, quote unquote identity. And I'm someone who feels things deeply, and that includes disappointment, grief, depression, sadness, melancholy, whatever. And so I'm really interested in these kinds of public conversations where other people can hopefully join in at some point, or right now, if anybody's listening, please do. But if you're listening later too, that it's like giving ourselves more permission for all of it, and to do it together, which I think is a huge piece of it. Because I want to go back to, and maybe you can say a little more about this, because you brought in that important piece of how sadness and grief can connect us. Yeah. Is there more that you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think so. Anytime I talk about grief now, so I'm a big nerd, and there's a show, a Marvel show called WandaVision about one of the characters, and it had one of the most beautiful lines I thought happened in TV, and that what is grief but love that persists?
Oh,
And so we all, I think, we have this human experience called grief of losing someone, of longing for, like Susan Cain would call it, longing for someone
yeah.
that's no longer with us. But that's like the connective tissue. Like anyone who's had a parent, which is everyone because we've all been born, right? Or have had a caretaker or family or friends or any type of connection is faced with the reality that someday we're going to lose him, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And sometimes we focus too much on it before it's happened, we get in our heads and that can cause a lot of stress. But when I'm not sure if this is felt this way with you, but like I was so afraid of my mom passing away before
Mm,
she even got sick. Like I know that it's like this is a big life event that's going to happen at some point in my life. I remember in my like growing up, like worrying about that, and when it happened, it was tougher in some ways, but also like a weird sigh of relief. And then I felt guilty because it's like, oh, this weird life event is over that I've been dreading so much.
yes. Oh, wow.
And that's such a weird, trippy thing to be dealing with grief. And then like, I'm glad that this is over with, but I'm sad that it happened. And like,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for articulating that, because that's a really subtle, place. And
yeah.
I actually get it. I get it, that there's and I don't know if it's exactly what you're talking about, but I have a cat who has cancer right now,
Mm.
and she's really not doing well. And her I don't even know if she's suffering. The vet said that she's not, and in animals, we project a lot onto them that we don't need,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I am, because every time, and this is going to sound maybe weird, maybe not, but it's like she represents the grief of the world to me right now, right? There's so
Mm-hmm.
much grief. There's so much suffering. There's so much pain in the world right now. And I feel as if I'm living with something that, I love her so much, and
Mm-hmm.
she's dying. And so I don't even know where I was going with that, except there's like what you were saying about like it's hard. This is it, I guess. It's hard to live with suffering. And
Mm-hmm.
yet we live in a world that, the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. It's everywhere. And I hear everyone speaking in those terms, various different languages, but
Mm-hmm.
how do we navigate such a beautiful world with beautiful people and bombings and killings and cancer, right? How do we do
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, I think if we could solve that, we would be very popular. But I think though it is that suffering though, that sorrow that is so connective. Like I've had pet cats. I remember when my cat passed before, or how he was before he passed, and how sad I was, and that whole experience. But again, it's that connectiveness. It's and this kind of relates to something else we were talking about yesterday, which is when are you saying something as a request for help versus I'm just feeling
Yes.
not 100%, or I'm feeling sad right now, and having, well, we can connect on our pets in them phases of their life. We could talk about what we love about them, and everyone who's had a pet has gone through that experience or will go through that experience, and just to be like, hey, I understand that is
Yeah.
okay, instead of like, are you okay, like how's it
Oh,
going,
right.
are you okay, are you okay, hey, everything good, you okay?
Bless you for that, Shawn. I love it because your very wise wife was talking about exactly
Mhm.
that yesterday. And I want to echo and underline what you just said. there's a love, of course, in saying to someone, are you okay? And yet, this is one of the things that I think was so helpful about our conversation, that can also sometimes be a bit of a request for, please be okay, because I really can't handle if you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking and sort of laughing about people in our life where it's just like, they're like, are you okay? Is definitely an imperative to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons I wanted to have this and hopefully future conversations with you about this topic is to bring in this possibility of saying to someone, oh, I'm here with you, or I know that experience, and wow, do you want to say more? Or inviting in, letting that person share with us where they are, and not
Mm-hmm.
maybe not like projecting either that they're okay or not okay, or
Mm-hmm.
need help or don't need help.
Yeah. On that thread, in situations, maybe in your life, what would you hope for people to say, or how have you supported people when they're like, hey, I'm going through a really rough patch right now?
Great question, Shawn. It's one of the reasons I love you. You're such a good question asker.
I live for the
Um,
best. So,
you know, one of the ways that I typically respond is I like to say to people, I'm no stranger to the dark. I'm not afraid of it. I like to let people know if they need space to swim around in something hard, that I'm okay holding that space. I like to
mm-hmm.
also remind people, like, I know who you are, I know you're strong. We were talking about this yesterday, right? Like that it's like, my beloved son in all of his wisdom once said that to me, when I'm having a hard time, if you could remind me how resilient I am and that I am strong, because I might forget in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's like, I hope to, and I strive to sort of offer people space for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I most appreciate too. I most appreciate just having space to just swim around in things, and to let it be, I'm crying one minute, I'm laughing the next, and I'm not bipolar, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a normal human response, and not, yeah, anything else other than that.
How about you? Can I throw the question back at you and hear for you?
Yeah, I like when I hear people going through a tough spot, offer to, if they want to talk about it, to talk about it. And if I know a little bit about it, just let them know that I feel for them. It's like, I understand why you would feel sad
Yeah.
because your parent died, because your parent died, because you didn't do great on that test, or like, it's part of, normalizing it. It's like, yeah, like we all feel that way. And if you want to talk about it, let me know. And then I tend to give people space too.
Love that, Shawn. And I really love what you just said. If your parent died, because one of the things that I've been hearing a lot over the last number of weeks is that comparative suffering that keeps people from expressing their own sadness. Oh, there's so much horror in the world. How can I be sad over XYZ in my own life?
Mm-hmm.
And I know Brene Brown does a wonderful talk on this, right? Like that there is no comparative suffering, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, as you've so beautifully said, I think that it's like, because it's what connects us, it's also what connects us to, I forget who uses the term piggyback suffering, but it's like, our cat dying very likely brings up when our grandfather died when we were
Mm-hmm.
right, like that. It's like, and we can't, I think, ever underestimate the mystery of how grief works.
Yeah. Piggyback suffering. I hadn't heard it explained that way, but I like that phrase. Um, and since we're both high performance coaches too, and how does this relate to high performance?
Right.
This reminds me of like the momentous mori that the Stoics would talk about, of like, hey, your time is limited. you better get into action. And that could be not the most positive, optimistic motivator, but it's a real drive for people. So sometimes I don't know how that works into this conversation or if it does, but that came up. So
it does though. And it's really interesting because I almost jumped in, but I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking about that sort of that pre-grieving, like, or the pre-pain when we're like thinking about someone dying that we love. And I almost said to you, because there's two sides to that, right? There's a way in which it might not be supportive. There's another way in which, for me, that's one of my biggest motivators in life. Like, anybody who knows me, like, my book, Say It Now, right? Where did that come from? It comes from thinking, oh my gosh, I could cry right now. Like, my wonderful friend Shawn, he might die or I might die at any moment. Have I told him? You know, have I loved him enough? Have I expressed it? Have I made time? It's yeah. What did Brendan calls it? Mortality motivation, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So how do you think it fits into our conversation right now?
Well, it came up because you talked about how your parent dying could remind you of your grandparent. We have these reminders, whether we want to or not, in our lives. And I think, because like you're such a presence person. That's, you know, I absolutely adore that about you. Is you're always like in the moment. Let's get here. And so are we consciously connecting to that part of our lives where we think about death, or we think about people around, like people around us dying, or that we will one day have that experience ourselves? And how are we sitting with it? Because I think, to get back to one of maybe the higher level ideas of our conversation, is like we're so focused on moving forward, not really taking the time now to sit in those feelings, to connect, but to just kind of move through it to get to the next thing, and we need more time to sit and reflect, I think.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I think you're right. Like, and this is also what I think, where you were saying, like, we are high performance coaches, right? Which is, I just want to say for a moment, sometimes that term can sound like a race car, like, go, go, go. And I always like to make sure that I say, like, what that means is a sustainable life of, to me, at least, I'm just going to say, this isn't the official, but it's like a sustainable life of deep relationships, connection to ourselves, being able to help ourselves pursue what means the most to us, living a life that feels like our best life, whatever that means. And so part of that, to me, is exactly what you just said. And I think maybe that's the first step to all of it, which is, will we allow ourselves the space to be still and to allow whatever's here to arise, right? Because if we don't, and that's why I put the terms toxic positivity and, Pollyanna in my description of this, I think if we don't allow ourselves that space, that's what happens, right? It's that, are you okay? Yeah, I'm doing great. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And
a lot of times people, I think, have that feeling too of like it not matching up. Like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, are you really? Like, and tying into this too, like, I'm a coach because of that experience with my mom. Like, that caused me to pump the brakes on my tech as a software engineer before.
Wow.
And to really like think about, am I living my most true, authentic self, which we talk a lot about it in high performance coaching. But like, that's when I signed up for the training, thinking I'd use it in tech. And I'm like, no, this is what I love. What's stopping me from doing this right now? And that changed everything, And it was that moment of reflection after grieving, and like, well, you have those big those philosophical questions of, what is my life? What is it? What is meaningful?
Oh my gosh, Shawn! I just realized we've only got a couple minutes left. That we said we were going to do. No. But what I want to say is, perfect. I think that's the perfect way to wrap up this conversation. We're going to have so many more, but because what you're saying is, again, it's that the grief and the sorrow not only connect us to other people in the empathy and the connection and how we can open our hearts to each other, but to ourselves. And that's what I hear you saying, is that grief with your mom opened up a door for you to examine, wow, what am I not seeing in my life, or what am I not living that in this short time maybe I want to bring in? And I just think I'm so grateful that you brought that in, because it's like another way that allowing ourselves that space to feel can open up a new door for us.
Absolutely.
Wow. I didn't know where exactly we were going to go, but this was, and this is a perfect example. It's kind of meta for me, that it's like simply having this space, this container to talk about it with you. I feel a different kind of openness, right? Well, I'm saying right as if you would know.
I feel it. I'm feeling it too, so I'm agreeing with you. I don't know what you're feeling, but yeah. I get what you're saying.
I'm so deeply grateful to you, because I think, again, and as people who are coaches, and I think a lot of times people see life coaches as like, it's just all yay, rah, go, keep going, keep your eyes forward. I think part of what we both were talking about yesterday that's so important is dispelling that myth that we can't have the whole range of emotions and still have a growth mindset and still be people who want to bring joy into the world.
Absolutely. It's just when those moments of struggle or sadness come up, it's allowing it to happen and being equipped with the tools to not get stuck in it. And that could be a whole lot. That could be our next conversation, is how to not get stuck in it.
I love that. Promise me. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say hi. I saw Kim Dayhoff just pop in, and Kim is in our Growth Day community and a wonderful leader who I've seen express the whole range of humanness with us. So thanks for being here, Kim. And anybody who is watching now or later who wants to leave a comment, or Shawn and I are really interested in continuing this conversation in some different forms. And so I'd love to hear from people. And Shawn, thank you. You're such a gift in my life and to the world. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you stepped up in this way that you did to be there to support people on their journeys.
Thank you. And this wouldn't have happened without you, of course. And I deeply admire your presence and your openness too. And the fact that we connected on this nerdy thing, we read this book and then it led into this crazy conversation. That's amazing. So
I know. Let's send out some love to Susan Cain for Bittersweet, right? Like, she's probably not watching right now, but I like to think the energy goes out that at this moment she's like, wow, I feel suddenly happy,
Yeah. She'll see this in a couple months, I'm sure. It'll pop up. So.
I love you, Shawn. Thank you. To be continued.
To be continued. Thanks,
Yay.
Sherry.
Yay.